Elden Ring is a vast world full of lots of things that are easy to miss, and some of these things are actually hidden from the player's normal point of view. So in this video, we're going to talk about 12 hidden things in Elden Ring that you possibly didn't know. This is SwankyBox here on ShieldScuff, and you know I love breaking games, so if that's your thing, subscribe now because we have more videos coming. Alright, so let's kick this video off with the very first thing. We're heading to the War Dead Catacombs, which are full of these powerful spirits. That is the catacombs that are available after you beat Radahn in the Wailing Dunes. Now, if you make your way through this dungeon without a giant arrow ripping you apart, you'll eventually come across this bend that has a Radahn soldier spirit waiting to attack you. And this guy is basically a trap like those annoying imps in other catacombs, but he doesn't trigger until we step out. However, if we utilize a weapon that is capable of striking through walls, like this whip, well, we can actually attack the soldier, causing his position to change, which causes him to change from a trap to something way more powerful. And that is an invincible soldier. So at this point, he is frozen in this state and cannot hurt us, but he also will not take any more damage. He's basically sitting here channeling the power of Rick, Soldier of God from the beginning of the game, and there is nothing that we can do. But moving on from undying soldiers, we have our second thing. So at the start of the game, not far from the first step site of grace, there is this hole. Now holes like this are kind of common throughout the Lands Between, and honestly other FromSoft games, but a crevice like this usually can mean the player can fall down into it and not die. However, as most of us know, if we fall into this hole, we will die. But I was always mesmerized by this pit because there's like this screaming and this wailing coming from nearby. And it seems strange to just have a pit here when there's no other pit like this close by at all. So falling down this pit does kill us, but if we somehow were to bypass the death barrier, we would fall straight down this pit and land in the Stranded Graveyard. This is a place that we first started, and if we were to look up in the Stranded Graveyard, we see a little sliver of light from the ceiling that sort of does line up with the land above it. I'm not sure if at one point this was how you got the talisman in here, but as it stands now, there is a hole that leads here. However, no player can reach the bottom because they will die. So we're heading back over to the land of General Radahn again, to the Wailing Dunes, for our third thing on the list. Now, off the coast of the Wailing Dunes are these shipwrecks, and these shipwrecks are so far away that it's really hard to get a good look at them. However, if we were to head out of bounds and get a closer look, we can see that some of these ships are actually cut in half. The surface of the water actually ends where the ship is at, while other ships do continue beneath the surface. Now, of course, the player is never going to see these up close, so the amount of detail in these models does not have to be much. But these ships are actually probably destroyed by Radahn's spears. Now, the fourth thing I want to talk about is something that some of you may know about, but others do not. And this is actually more helpful towards the beginning of the game rather than at the end. But there's the Blessed Dew Talisman, which is honestly awesome, and it restores 2 HP per second when it's equipped. But what some players may not know or even noticed is that when you equip this talisman, it also heals 2 HP. So you can spam the equip and unequip button on this talisman and actually restore your health faster than normal. And like I said, this is very helpful when your HP bar is very small and you have low HP, especially at the start of the game. For the fifth thing, we're going to head over to the crumbling Farum Azula to take a look at the flying dragons way on the distance. Now, this is just something that the player normally cannot see up close, but I wanted to show it off. So there's tons and tons of dragons flying around, but if we were to slow down time and look at one of these dragons up close, this is what they look like. You can see them soaring around in their low poly goodness. So what's interesting about these dragons is they have 2 legs and their front legs are actually just the wings, versus the actual dragons we fight down below have 4 legs and wings. So it's kind of interesting that the dragons we fight are actually not these same dragons. I wonder what fighting those wyverns up above would have been like. Moving on to number 6, we're heading to the Ash Capital, and this is the area where you fight the final boss of the game. However, unseen to the player, inside the Erd Tree, deep, way underground, we can actually find the Elden Beast sitting there floating in the middle of nowhere. So this is a very common occurrence in this game. They typically store second phases of bosses underground and swap them out, so we can just find the Elden Beast down here chilling in all its glory. And speaking of things deep underground, we're heading over to Ranni's Rise for number 7. Now Ranni's Rise sits atop this giant cliffside, but beneath her tower, like way down in the ground, actually beneath the surface of the water, the ocean, is some assets left over by the developers. No player could possibly ever see these, but there are some ruins down here that were scrapped and left behind. It makes me wonder if they were once a part of something. Next up, we have sort of a double whammy with 8 and 9. So Sanguine Nobles are like these deadly assassins that serve Moog, and these dudes can rise out of the floor and attack players. So first thing is you can't really ever see their face, and even if you tried, if we took the camera and looked, they actually do not have a face. In fact, their model lacks geometry in that area. So if you were to look inside, you'd actually see out the back of their model. And something else is, as you make your way through the caves and stuff, you can see these assassins rise from a pool of blood. And in actuality, they are normally just sitting beneath the ground, frozen in place, waiting for you to trigger them. They're basically like a dungeon trap, just waiting to destroy you. So for number 10, we're gonna take a closer look at Deathblight. Oh, I know. We all love Deathblight. We all love those frog enemies very, very much. But Deathblight actually looks really, really cool in slow motion. And this is what that looks like. So we can see our character flash with this bright light as these vines begin to weave their way through our body. It's actually a very, very painful looking death. And on the inside, if we were to look inside the character's model, we can see that all these branches basically start in the same point. They're all overlapping and they just have this center point and they all shoot out from the area. So it looks very jumbled inside, but it's actually quite glorious on the outside. But yeah, then we die. But hey, at least we planted a tree. That counts for something, right? So for number 11, we're moving to a sorta imaginary place. We're going to the Round Table Grace, which is probably actually the biggest one in the game. However, the grace that we see here inside this table is nothing more than an illusion. When we walk up to this table and we activate it, we're not actually activating this giant grace. No, there's a trick to it. And the trick is that the developers put a small set of grace, a normal sized one, actually within the table out of view. So we are actually using that set of grace, but it looks like we're using the big boy. It's a pretty simple trick. And without leaving this area, we actually have the final thing I want to talk about, which is number 12. This area, this lost table of grace, the Round Table Hold. So this area is basically a magical version of the same location in the royal capital. And the developers mirrored that location, and they kind of just copy and pasted that environment to use it here. Now because of that, there's actually quite a bit of areas in this place we cannot get to. There are several locked doors that never open regardless of our progress. So if we go behind this one, we'll see that there is a stone deck behind the door. A pretty neat hiding spot, if I must say so myself. And if we move to a different location, we can find a door that actually has a lever to open it behind it. Now, of course, this hallway, at least in this situation, leads nowhere. However, back in the actual royal capital, this was of course different. But all these areas are still sorta here, partially. There's just a lot of stuff out of bounds we cannot get to, but it's interesting to see that it is still here. But with that brings us to the end of the video. I hope at least one of these things was new to you, or at least interesting. And if it was, consider subscribing for more videos just like this one. Thanks for watching, and cheers.